Guys, welcome to the podcast. This is going to be kind of a fun little series that we're going to do on Coues deer hunting, and I'm going to go back through the 600 and some episodes and find some of the best Coues deer episodes that we've done here. And hope you guys enjoy it. We've got Coues deer hunts going all over central and southern Arizona right now, and we've got the mid-December hunts coming up here quick, and the OTC December and January archery hunts. So I figured you guys had Coues on the brain. I'm going to try and pull some of the best stuff over the last 4 years. So, guys, before we get to that episode, I want to thank you for your avid support of this podcast. You guys show loyalty to this podcast, and it's amazing. I'm very appreciative of that. If you guys have any questions at all or comments, you can reach me at jscottoutdoors@gmail.com. You can also send me a direct message on Instagram at jscottoutdoors. Love to hear from you guys. Thanks for all of the support. And I also hear from my sponsors virtually every day about how much support you guys give them. So I want to thank you guys for that. I want to thank the sponsors of the podcast. I want to thank GoHunt.com. And right now, there's Black Friday sales going on at GoHunt.com. Go check it out. There's anywhere from 25 to 50% discounts. Some really cool stuff out there. Plus, you get a chance to win a free elk hunt. So go check it out. I also want to thank my friend Cody Nelson. He's the optics manager there at GoHunt.com. If you guys have any optical needs at all, if you have any questions in regard to glassing, or if you're looking to purchase any optics, whether it be binos, tripods, spotting scopes, rifle scopes, anything to do with glassing, give Cody a call, 702-847-8747. That's extension 2. You can also send him an email directly at optics@gohunt.com. I want to thank them for their sponsorship. Also want to remind you guys that you can check out the Go Hunt Insider, get a little bit of a jump start on application season. Go to gohunt.com/jscott. That's going to get you a $50 Go Hunt Gear Shop gift card. I want to thank Coues Ultralight Hunting. Coues gear is the gear that I wear on all of my hunts. You can go on my Instagram page routinely throughout the week. I'm answering questions. A lot of those questions pertain to Coues gear. Coues gear, if you want to know more about it, you can also go to Coues, that's KUIU.com. And Coues Ultralight Hunting Gear, I've been wearing it since 2010. And if you guys haven't tried it, you need to. It's awesome stuff. They also have some great sales going on right now. I also want to thank phonescope.com. If you use the JScott19 promo code, you're going to get a 10% discount. And onxmaps.com. Right now, a special for a few more days, if you use the Thanks30, so go to onxmaps.com, use the Thanks30, you're actually going to get a 30% discount. Normally here at the J Scott Outdoors podcast, you get a 20% discount for using JScott19. But if you want 30% discount, go to onxmaps.com, Thanks30, and I want to thank them for their sponsorship. Guys, let's get right to this series on Coues deer hunting. And again, thanks for all your support.
Welcome to the J Scott Outdoors podcast. Today we have a Coues deer fanatic on the other end of the line. We've got Gino Wullkotte from Strawberry, Arizona. And I've known Gino for quite a while, and I've bumped into him in the woods from time to time. And I respect what Gino does. And Gino's a hardcore Coues deer fanatic and is around these deer all the time. And I'm excited to have him on to talk about Coues deer and their patterns, and both archery and rifle, and he's guiding a client right now. Gino guides for A3 trophy hunts, and just excited to have him on the podcast today. Gino, how you doing?
Good, Jay. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you about Coues deer. Specifically, you kind of work those units, 22s, 23s, 6As, right there, in central Arizona. What's going on out there in the Coues deer woods? I know you've got a client you've been hunting here the last few days.
Well, it's the weather's been a challenge. We've had quite a bit more moisture than we're used to, which is a blessing and a curse. But the deer are up and they're grouped up and they're starting to really move well. So it's been fun. We've been seeing a lot of deer.
So Gino, have you guys actually during this hunt do you have snow on the ground, or have you had actual sessions of glassing closed down due to whiteouts or weather?
Yeah, we've had a little of both. A lot of low clouds these last few days for sure, and um, some rain, and certainly in this north country, all the northern faces are covered in snow and mud, and just a ball to be out in the woods and soaked all the time.
You know, I don't know about you, but I would rather it be snowing than raining. It seems like when it's, that cold drizzle, your optics get wet, and it just becomes very challenging when you're trying to use your eyes to find those deer. Can you weigh in on whether you'd rather it just be flat snowing or whether you'd rather it be raining?
Actually, yeah, I'm kind of a sissy about that. I'm a fair weather Coues deer hunter. I kind of feel like that if I don't want to be in it, the deer don't want to be in it. We see some deer if we're looking right into pockets when it's like that, but I'd rather stay dry if I can, and as soon as it breaks, I'd rather get back in it.
Yeah, I want to ask you a question about that. It seems as though if you have the fortune of having the ability to hunt that whole, and let's talk specifically the December Coues season in Arizona. It's pretty darn liberal. I think it's close to 3 weeks long. Are there days when you just see that the weather's going to be extremely crappy and the wind's going to be blowing and moisture in and out? Will there be days when you just kind of sit it out and wait for the storm to clear? And as another question on top of that, how do you see the next day after a storm? Let's say it blows out and overnight and it's clear and crisp the next morning. What is the differences you see there?
Well, I think first and foremost it has a lot to do with who has the tag. For example, if we're hunting with someone who's not necessarily going to hold up to the freezing temperatures and being wet and so on, we probably would sit out, trap the weather. On the flip side, when you're hunting with a gentleman who's just earned 12 bonus points to hunt one of these late tags, sitting at home and watching the weather versus being out in it and giving it the good old college try is not really an option. You've got to be out there. For me, myself, if I have the tag, which I never do, but if I did, I would certainly pick and choose my days.
Yeah. And do you see a noticeable difference on days when it's bluebird, cold and crisp, as opposed to blowing wind?
Absolutely. That was kind of my fair weather comment from before. These deer absolutely love to be out in the clear, cold weather. And their biggest predator, the guys that are out there all the time when we're not in mountain lands, they love it when it's windy. So, of course, the Coues deer don't love it when it's windy.
And speaking of windy, Gino, I've found if you do have those windy days, if you can get up on points and put the wind in your face and basically eliminate the windy side of the hill because it's blowing in your face and be looking into the lee side or the non-windy side, I've been amazed at how many deer actually you can find in those pockets. They almost become predictable. Weigh in on that a little bit.
I think that's 100% true. Yesterday, for example, the weather was awful, and in the afternoon, the wind was whipping. We were fortunate enough to be sitting on a pocket of deer, with the wind just beating us to death, and looking into that leeward side, and saw lots of deer. But they were just up and down. They don't move. They don't cover much ground. They're constantly got their ears going and looking around because they're expecting, the worst all the time.
For people that don't or haven't hunted Coues deer, it's really hard to explain. But I witness those deer, like you're saying, their ears are up and they're basically when it's windy and the weather is, they can't hear, and they have to be on alert and on attention at all times. And it really puts them in, an agitated state, so to speak, which in turn I think makes those deer, they just don't move. And the difference in when you have, say, in my opinion, like 5-6 days of clear, just bluebird, normal weather, they're going to get out sometimes a lot more out in the open and feed. And it seems like they can relax a little bit. And when they relax, it seems as though they let their guard down. From a glassing perspective, they tend to branch out a little bit more, while they probably feel completely in control because at that point they can hear everything around them. I would much rather have clear days, more calm type weather than the storms that we've been having, that you've been facing here the last couple of weeks during this season.
Yeah, I think that's a real solid statement. As a lot of people know, I hunt with my Queensland healer with me all the time, and I watch what he's doing. If he's sitting in the sun, then I've got a better chance of seeing deer in the sun. And if he's tucked in a hole out of the wind, that's kind of what they're going to be doing.
Yeah.
Just, all animals are the same. The elk do the exact same thing. Sheep are notorious for it. As you well know, usually those leeward sides out of the storm versus, the sunny sides on the clear days when it's cold. Those are the places that we look based on the weather.
Gino, this hunt that you're guiding right now, this December hunt, is oftentimes looked at as and quote unquote called the rut hunt. And it's been my experience that even in the central Arizona units where you've got a little bit higher elevation, around Payson, Camp Verde, some of the higher elevations in the 22s, 23s, 6As, as opposed to down south, it's always been said that those deer rut earlier. And I do agree with that, but it's been my experience that normally the Coues deer really don't show a lot of signs of really running around and bucks actively chasing does until the last few days, definitely after Christmas, but say the last 5 days of the hunt. Is that what you're witnessing this year?
I think it's pretty consistent every year. I don't really know that the deer rut earlier or later in these units, depending on the situation. But they're notorious for having the best action in January during the archery hunts versus the rifle hunts. But we get a lot more movement in December, and bucks staging up and checking does and that sort of thing, hanging out around the does and being a lot closer. There's a lot of chasing action going on, throughout the month of December. We even see them chasing sometimes in November. But I almost believe it's more a situation where you've got a doe here and a doe there that is maybe coming into an early cycle or something like that. And those are the ones that's why we just keep moving, because you're hoping you catch that deer. And that deer will hopefully show you lots of bucks. And that's this time of year, that's what you're praying for.
That's interesting. I want to expand a little bit on, you say you keep moving. What do you mean by you keep moving?
In October, November hunt, you may sit on the same rock for days. I very rarely stay in the same spot more than a day in a row, one day in a row. I may come back later and check a spot, but I want to see deer, so I keep looking this time of year.
So In other words, in October, November, you've got deer that you've patterned that are in a habitual situation where they do the same thing every day. And if you know a buck is there, you are going to sit and look into that buck's country until you find that buck. Whereas as December moves on through the month, you're actually moving around more, trying to find some of those does that may be coming into cycle where they may draw a buck out of the brush into visible where you can see them. So you yourself are going to move a lot more than you would in October and November.
I think that's a pretty fair statement.
And after Christmas, have you seen before in those 22, 23 units? I mean, have you seen it where it's, Katie bar the door, every place when you're moving around, whether morning you go somewhere, evening you go somewhere for a couple days in a row, you're bouncing around. Have you seen it where it just turns wide open and there's deer chasing, bucks chasing does literally all over the hillsides?
I think year to year everything's a little different. I can't say that in December I've had many years where it was that Katie bar the door thing, but there's certainly more hot does the later end of the month we go, and like I said before, I really think that's what we're looking for. The does are the bait, if you will.
Yeah.
And so the longer it goes into the into their rut cycles, the more does that are going to be hot. And there's nothing more exciting than having a hot doe on a hillside with 4 or 5 bucks running around. And I think that's what really drives us on these hunts is to get in the middle of that.
Absolutely. Gino, what, in your mind, what makes good Coues country? I mean, you hear people talking about Coues country, and as you know, Coues deer, they exist in many different parts of terrain of Arizona, and Mexico, and New Mexico for that matter. But in your mind, what makes great Coues country?
Living in the country that I do in Central Arizona. That's a really tough question because I can run 30 minutes in any 30 or 40 minutes in any direction and be into flat bottom deserts and be hunting Coues deer if the weather's crap up in the high country, and do so. I love finding Coues deer in the saguaro cactuses and prickly pears, ocotillos and stuff like that. It's always neat and fun to find them there. Plus, they're a heck of a lot easier to see when they're in that desert country. Everybody loves to hunt the thicker brush country, but it can be a demeaning process to sit there for hours and hours and not see anything, and know in your heart there's got to be deer there. The great part about this country along Central Arizona, whether you're in 6A, 21, 22, 23, you're along that Mogollon Rim, you have the potential to find Coues deer in the pine trees, and you have the potential to find them in the desert, in the cactuses. So that variety of terrain, I think, is really, it sets the bar. You can kill giant Coues deer in any of those places, and I never hesitate to run downhill from this high country because it gets monotonous sitting up here waiting for that one Coues deer.
Yeah, and expand a little bit on, I know from hunting, 22 and 23 up in some of the higher elevations, for the listeners out there that haven't been in that country, you've got real thick manzanita and brush and pines, and why is that more of a challenge for people, say, that newer hunters and people that are, just getting into it? Why is that country harder to find deer than, say, the lower elevations of more the desert, mesquite, and what have you?
Well, from a biology standpoint, I've never really understood why, but it always seems to me that the high country has lower deer densities. The further south you go, you seem to get higher numbers. I don't know if the desert environments just seem to cater to more deer. Maybe it has something to do with it, that less predation, because there's less cover for the predators to hide in the desert. I'm not really sure, but up here in the higher country, you have two things. One, you have the gray ghost, which is the hardest thing on earth to see on an open hillside, much less a hillside covered with gray and green brush that is, between 3 and 10 foot tall. We were looking at a Coues deer buck just yesterday in brush country that you could see the head and horns of him when you picked his head up, and the rest of the time you could never see that deer. And that's so if a deer never stands up out of its bed, you're never going to see it. So that would be the biggest reason it's difficult to hunt this high country. And with lower deer densities to begin with, you're certainly looking for less deer.
Yeah, and certainly with that, would you agree that at times, because it's challenging to hunt, because of that exact situation that you just described, where the buck has to have his head up for you to even see the deer, it can also produce some big giant deer because they're harder to hunt in that country and they can hide better, and definitely the high country can yield some giant bucks. Sometimes they can be impossible to kill too as well.
I think that you can find almost as many, probably the same amount of giants in low country. You just have to look where everybody else isn't looking. It's an age class thing. These deer that are going to get 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, those are the deer that you're looking for if you want to kill a big deer. You're not going to find that in a place that's got 7 trucks every day of the hunt. So you've got to find places where people aren't all the time. And that doesn't necessarily mean you got to hike 40 miles from a truck, but it does mean that some pockets of deer get a little more age class than others.
For sure. Gino, one of the things that Dar and I have witnessed down in Mexico, and I'm real curious to get your opinion on this. We've seen deer, let's say, that we have passed on and elected to not have our hunters shoot, certain deer that say might be, 102, 103, 104, 105 inch type deer that, we're like, man, let's just let that deer grow up and see what he'll be next year. And it's funny how when we do that, a lot of times we come back and find the same buck the next year, and he's the same size. And we've kind of come to the conclusion that there are some deer, and I would even say most deer, that you see, a lot of them are never going to be bigger than what you see. They may get a little heavier or what have you. And I don't know as much if it's a Mexico thing or if it's an Arizona thing, but I think there's some deer that will never even reach 100 inches. They'll always be, that 95-inch buck and the same length points and the same look and frame once they reach maturity. And we find that there's, handfuls of bucks that seem to go from, 75-inch buck to a 90-inch buck to a 105-inch buck to, 115-inch buck, and, they continue and just blow up. But have you seen deer, and what have you discovered as far as deer either blowing up or remaining the same for 2 or 3 years in a row?
Well, I think that you're spot on with what you see there in Mexico. I think it's the same with public land. Arizona, realistically, a lot of deer are never going to be giants regardless of how much age they get. We killed a deer in an October hunt one year that we had a side rack off of him. He was in inline 4 on that side, and we were hoping he was on both sides. When we killed him the next year, he was less than a half-inch difference in size than he was the year before, and he was a mature buck. Deer like that are just never, at a hunt he was 100 or 101, never going to be any better. And and a solid deer. That deer no one should ever pass up. But I think you can tell a lot about these deer just from the early years. What they're doing if they start out with with some pretty amazing looking genetics, they have that potential maybe. But are they going to stonewall? Well, shoot, nobody really knows. Some deer just all of a sudden decide to be a freak. Who knows what causes that? Is it something in their environment? Is it something that that happened to them? There's just no way to know that. Is it a genetic thing? But there are certainly some deer that in public land you wish would grow.
Yeah.
But, the truth of it is because we're hunting in a public land environment, you have to shoot a buck when you see it. You can't wait for it to get older. A lion's going to get it or something. I had a buck that I missed some years ago, an October hunt that I just snapped a shot at him, was a little too quick, and a lion hunter picked him up as he trailed a lion over the kill in January that following year. So, you just can't take a risk and let them go.
Yeah, it's always, as you know, in trying to look over and try and pick a great buck for your client to shoot or a buck for yourself to shoot, the last time you see a deer, in my mind, a Coues deer, the last time, or, when you leave driving away from that deer, it's always in the back of my mind, will I ever see that deer again? And the answer is sometimes you will and sometimes you won't. And like you said, you couldn't have said any better with the amount of lions that we have in Arizona, in this country. Their success rate of living isn't great. It's hard for those bucks to reach that age, 6, 7, 8 years old. It's virtually impossible. And I think that's why you don't see a lot of those bucks being shot. You see a lot of, a year and a half, 2.5, 3.5-year-old deer killed. But, you get up in that 6, 7, 8 range, that's an old deer.
Yeah, absolutely. There's the predation is high, and of course, then they have to deal with 3 or 4 Coues deer hunts every year. That doesn't help either.
Yeah, yeah. I want to talk to you a little bit about, and we're kind of bouncing back and forth, but the different style of tactic in hunting between, your early season, let's say even from the early, August archery deer season to, watching them all summer and watching them in October and November, as opposed to watching them and scouting for them in December, late December, and even into January. What are some of the things that you noticed the most about those different time periods?
The biggest issue with the October hunts, I think, is that you've watched these bucks, whether it be a junior deer hunt or an early October hunt, you've watched a lot of them, if you've scouted, grow their antlers, and they're somewhere there. They're within their home range. So you've got to find ways to be creative and dig them up, because they're hiding and they have really no intention of giving themselves up. They've got to make a mistake or you're not going to find them. What we love about the December hunts is that the girls are going to make that mistake for you. They're going to be out there trying to see if there's any hot does and rutting those does, chasing them over the hillsides, whatever the conditions might be. And so you just got to be out there, and you've got to hope to catch them making those mistakes, whether it's October or December. And they just make a lot more mistakes as the year gets later.
I totally agree with you. I think one of the things too, a lot of guys like yourself actually love to hunt those bucks in October and like that first rifle season, in the fact that you can really scout, July, August, September, and really pattern those bucks. And it seems as though they've got a very tight home range, during those months, and they don't move a whole lot as far as distance. And it seems as though when you get into the December hunt, one of the things I like about the December hunt, for one, is it's 3 weeks long. For two, from a human standpoint, it's usually more, it's colder. It's better hiking weather. It's granted you've had some rough, last couple weeks of snow and, that type of thing. But, October can be, very hot from just a comfort standpoint of human beings. Hot hiking and what have you, and you need to pack more water. Whereas December, it's cooler and easier conditions, quote unquote. I think the biggest challenge in hunting these, later December hunts and into the rut is it's a double-edged sword, because yes, the deer are out and moving around more, but then you throw in bucks chasing does that might be visible to your eye, but when you actually go to try and get close to them, set up, put the backpack down, build you a rest, and try and shoot at these deer, sometimes when you have them pegged in October, where they're maybe moving 50 yards in one direction or another, sometimes I think killing them in October is easier than when they're running around chasing the does after Christmas. What do you think?
I think that's absolutely spot on. There's nothing better than finding that big Coues deer buck in an early hunt and knowing he's going to be right there, somewhere right there. And then when you relocate him, you can actually, get on him. These deer that are running around right now or cruising, they can cover so much ground in the time it takes for you to close on them that you can lose them completely. I think that's kind of given way to some of the long range hunting that's going on with specifically with Coues deer hunting now, and guys build some really nice guns that'll reach out there. Is that you increase your odds significantly if you can shoot that deer from where you see him, versus having to get to 200 or 300 yards with more older style conventional rifle.
Yeah, there's absolutely no doubt about it. The most guys that you see that have harvested, big Coues deer successfully over and over are usually guys that have honed their skills and can shoot very, very well, out to 500-600 yards, and in some cases even further, where if you have to leave your rock, drop down a ravine, cross two canyons to get, 250 yards, your chances of success are probably going to be a lot less, because one, the deer has a chance to move, the deer has a chance to bed down, the deer has a chance to do something to get out of your sight. So certainly for those people out there listening, getting a really good rifle with a really good scope is good as they can afford, and then being very comfortable being able to shoot long distances and practicing those distances, I think just ups your chances for sure of being able to harvest a deer. Gino, I want to transition just a little bit into, I know you've had some really good success archery deer hunting in January, and I want to talk a little bit about, the Arizona Game and Fish Department made some changes a couple years ago, and you can refresh my memory when that was, but in my mind, honestly, it seems ridiculous to me that they took the baiting where people could put out, corn, could put out other things to attract deer, and, sit in a stand or sit in a blind and successfully hunt deer. I feel like archers have a hard enough time killing and being successful I wasn't exactly, I didn't really like the change, to be honest with you. And this comes from someone that really doesn't spend a lot of time archery deer hunting. I'm usually in Mexico and have other things going on, but it just seems as though they could have done a lot of things. And personally, I think they kind of took away a lot of people's love of hunting in January and kids' opportunity, what have you. What are your thoughts on the subject?
Well, I think that it was a direct attack on opportunity in the state of Arizona. They fed us kind of an unsubstantiated line of crap, if you will, about chronic wasting disease, and we just don't have the deer densities for that. The best part about the baiting the way it was previously was the recruitment. In today's world of kids, we're literally fighting against technology, where these kids would much rather sit indoors and play their Game Boys or with their iPads or whatever they do now. And so if you ask them to sit in a ground blind and wait for a Coues deer to walk by, and they don't see one for a day or 2 days in a row, they're pretty much done. They've had enough. With the way the baiting played into the game was that you were catering to the density of the densities of the deer. The does were constantly, at least coming by maybe once a day or something. If you got in front of them, that's the one misconception. You can dump a pile of bait anywhere and not see a single deer. You still have to be in their path. But these kids would see these deer and they would get excited, and it didn't matter if they actually harvested a deer or not. At least they saw deer. And I think that was, and then the older hunters, as we get older, I should say. I feel like I'm getting old, but I'm not yet. We get around the hills as good as we could. It's great to have that opportunity to be able to sit in a chair, whether it be in a tree or in a ground blind, and have deer come by you. Our deer densities are fairly low here, so if you just set up a ground blind or a tree stand and expect a deer to come by, gosh, you could sit there for a long time before one does. If you look at the ground just in the mud or whatever, in the days this time of year, you'll see that there's places where a deer walks by once a week. That could be pretty disheartening for a new hunter or someone who's not willing to punish themselves like some of us are, to sit there for days and days in the cold.
Yeah, on one hand, you hear all sorts of talk about we want to increase hunter opportunity, and we're going to put this season in and put this rifle season in and this rifle season and this, you hear it over and over and over. We're going to increase tags on this hunt and this hunt and this hunt. And here you've got a very small group of people, in my mind, in relation to the big group of rifle hunters, that are enjoying archery deer hunting. And it's not as though, in my mind, and you can weigh in on this, it's not as though you're in Texas, nothing against our Texas friends, but and you've got a timed feeder, and boom, the feeder goes off. They show up 10 minutes before the feeder's going to go off. They stand under it and, wait for it to go off. The densities of deer, like you said, that we're dealing with are way different than I think what the perception is. Can you weigh in on, you throw a bag of corn out and it's, the perceived notion was that the deer just come right to it, they have no chance, and, the hunters just sit there and pick them off one by one. I don't think that that's the situation at all. Like you said, they may come by once a day, maybe even every couple days.
Exactly. And I think the real push here, Jay, was what was more from a commerce standpoint than it was about hunters. I really think that Game and Fish was very concerned that individuals could have an impact on deer or on hunters' success, whether it be a guide or whether it be a family of people who was getting the whole family involved and everybody was able to kill a deer. We held a deer camp at our house here every year where we were harvesting 7-8 deer a year. They really hated that.
But I don't understand why they would hate that when they, up a tags in a unit by 400 or 500 and rifle hunters when, I just don't get that mindset. Let's create more opportunity for rifle hunters, but let's take it away from the archers. I don't get that.
Well, this is feedback that we got directly from some of the wildlife managers who were behind the push for the rule change. They did not like the success. There was a few guys in southern Arizona having success. There was a slew of people in the central part of Arizona, whether they be private individuals or guides as well, that were having success. They did not like that, and they made it known that they didn't like it, and they made it known that they were going to take it away. When we put forth the fight that we were going to argue with them on the opportunity angle, they kind of quit for a while, and then when they came back with chronic wasting disease and no data to support it being even an issue here in the state of Arizona. It was, and truthfully, I don't think that they're really enforcing it out there. I don't know this for a fact, but I think they just did it to put another rule on the books to keep honest people honest, and they're not really concerned about whether it's going on out there or not now.
That's an interesting point. Yeah, I don't know. I hope they revisit that and maybe make a change back to how it was and let those art.
They had a really unique opportunity, I think, where they could have used archery deer hunters as a management tool. So few of the deer harvested by archery hunters are animals that rifle hunters would be hunting anyways, unless they're spot and stock deer, which since they put this bill in place, there have been an exponentially higher amount of spot and stock harvest in Arizona. But I think that the thing that they could have done and should have done is that they should have said, well, we're seeing too many deer based on our mandatory reporting, which they had in place at that time. We're seeing too many deer being harvested in certain areas. So let's go ahead and institute something similar to what we have with our bear in Arizona, where we have a quota. Once a certain quota has been met in that particular unit, well, we're going to shut that unit down the following Wednesday, and they have something solid management-wise to bank on that they're not going to exceed that. They didn't even consider that as an option. It was something that was brought to their attention that just didn't seem to make sense to them. They had all the pieces of the puzzle in place. They really just wanted to shut people down and to limit the opportunity for bow hunters in Arizona.
Yeah, I find that to be unfortunate. I hope they revisit that for sure. And I want to ask you, moving forward, when your client comes back in, you're going to get to hunt some after Christmas. What are you going to focus on as far as, are you targeting a specific buck, or are you just covering country knowing that if over the last 5-6 days of that season, a buck of which you would like to shoot will present itself?
I can honestly tell you we are deer hunting. We are looking at all the deer, and which is my absolute favorite way to December Coues deer hunt. For me, it almost gets in my way to be looking for one deer because the opportunities are endless. You just never know what is going to come out of the shadows somewhere this time of year. It's like Christmas Day every day. Literally one pan of the glass away from the Coues deer of your dreams, and it doesn't really matter where you are. As long as there's does on that hill in front of you, you could see the next big giant.
For sure. Well, I hope you find that. I see one question here in my notes that I'm kind of bouncing all over the place, but um, as the season, as January 1st hits, and then a bunch of these units open up for archery deer over the counter. In your mind, I get a lot of emails, guys asking about how to archery deer hunt. Walk me through your thought process, and let's talk about areas where deer are visible, maybe not as much in the thick country. Let's just talk about, glassable, maybe a little bit higher deer density country. When January 1st rolls around, walk me through like a typical morning of strategy as what you will try and do as an archery deer hunter.
I think for the spot and stock enthusiast, and it's become a lot more popular these last few years. One, you got to be willing to walk your legs off, but you've got to be able to hunt country that you can get around in. So the brush country's fairly well out as far as that goes. But if you can find a place that has a decent amount of deer, and you've witnessed those deer covering a specific area, a specific travel pattern, you can spot and stalk them, or you can choose to try and sit that location. I think that a lot of it really comes down to understanding the deer in the particular area you're hunting. For some people are just quick learners and very it's very easy for them to get into the swing of things and get out there and hunt deer. For others, it's more of a challenge. So I always tell folks, get out there and scout with a tag in your pocket, but spend more time learning and less time hunting. If the opportunity presents itself, why you've got your bow and a tag in your pocket. But I absolutely love to walk around the woods during January and just learn about deer, whether I even get a chance to draw my bow or not.
I think that's great advice. I think Coues deer specifically are an animal that the more you can observe their behavior, the better chances you have of establishing a pattern and making a predictable game plan to go try and put a stalk on that deer. It makes me think of an article a long time ago, Eddie Claypool, who I believe writes for Bowhunter, and is actually a friend. He said, there's oftentimes I will sit and watch a deer for 4, 5, 6 days before I even go after the deer, trying to learn, and just what you said, trying to figure out what that deer is doing and which ridge that he's running, where he likes to bed, so that you can, he watched and had a specific deer in the article. I think he watched him for 7 days before he even went after the deer. Coues deer, one of the things I like about Coues deer hunting is you can use your optics, and you can get up on high points, and you can sit and just enjoy watching them move around. Certainly in January, they are a lot more visible, and even people that are not experienced Coues deer hunters can actually go out and enjoy seeing those deer. So I think that's something that people can take to heart and, like you said, observe more and learn more about what they're doing before they go and make a stalk on those deer.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a point where the world has turned to that instant gratification. We want to go out and we want to be successful. But if we take a step back and really enjoy why we're out there, the whole pressure of filling the tag becomes a little less strenuous.
Yeah, that's awesome. I want to ask you here as we close up this episode, I want to talk to you a little bit about gear, and what are some pieces of gear that you use that you feel are 100% paramount in your success?
Well, I think over the years, I've kind of changed a lot. Uh, I remember back my very first pair of binoculars was a pair of 1042 SLCs, uh, and I loved those things, but I realized quite quickly on that I couldn't see these deer um, without a tripod. It was kind of that the whole tripod thing was. I always thought of it as for a spotting scope, and but as things came about, I realized I could see a lot more. Then, of course, went on to the 1556s, being able to see even more. I've since traded those in on a pair of 1050s, and I've settled on that.
Swarovski 1050s?
Yeah, they're absolutely my favorite glass. I can carry them around my neck. They're not as big as 15s, but I'm all about field of view. I find that I find more deer out of my peripheral than I ever do looking directly at something. So the bigger field of view that I can see, it makes me more patient for one, because I don't feel like I have to keep moving all the time. And I can just look at that screen and try to find something that moves or something that gives itself away. These last few years, I've also incorporated the Coues into the game. They've certainly changed how I hunt, or how I scout mostly, not necessarily as much how I hunt, because I hate pack them when I'm hunting, but I absolutely love being able to look and pick brush apart with big glasses, with a field of view like that. I think that for me personally, it's not the magnification as much as large field of view. So from an optics standpoint, I tell everybody that I stay away from the stuff that shrinks that view down. I get frustrated whenever I switch over to my spot and scope to try to field judge an animal, because the field of view is so much smaller. And I think that just resonates with me time and time again every time I pull that spotting scope out.
Yeah, I totally see where you're coming from. I always, I really like the 15 by 56, the new Swarovskis. I have the 12s too, and Gino, I do have to agree with you. The one thing I like about the 12s, on days, there are some days that I like the 12s better, in the fact that I think you bring up a great point about being able to see edge to edge as far as, field of view and picking stuff up. The wider field that you have, if you still have a good clarity and good vision on a hill, it makes sense that the wider field of view you're going to pick up, especially if deer are moving or up feeding. You're going to definitely have a chance to pick up more deer. I agree with you on that. And then as on the 32 power Coues as well, in some regards, they're a game changer for a Coues deer hunter in my mind, because you can start becoming effective, a couple miles away, and people don't really realize that that's even a possibility, but it's the truth. And, if you have the ability to get up high with those binoculars and sit for a long period of time, I mean, you're gonna see more game further away. Now that creates its own problems, but when you're scouting, like you said, just finding the deer is the first part of the equation. Then once you find a particular deer, then you can move closer and continue watching that deer maybe from a closer vantage. But I tend to agree with you on the Coues. I mean, you can look long distance and see very, very well, much like the same, looking through 10s or 12s or 15s, at, say, out to, almost a mile. With the 32s, you can look, 2 miles. And so I agree with you on that. I want to ask you a question about field of view, and I've asked people on the podcast before. When you're sitting down and glassing, when you're panning, Gino, looking at a Coues deer hillside, do you typically let's say you're looking at a hill. Do you start at the top? Do you start at the bottom? Do you start at the left or the right? Do you pan up and down? Do you pan side to side? Kind of walk me through. And I think people that are just starting to learn how to glass can listen to guys like yourself and how your thought process of how you pan across a hill, how you do that.
Well, I frustrate myself sometimes because I have a tendency to jump around because I'm eager. Oh, I want to see what's right there. Oh, I want to see what's right here. But I have to kind of back up and force myself. I'm always a big believer that I want to catch the spots first where I might lose an animal. So if I think that's on the skyline, then I'm going to hit that skyline first because right at daylight or whatever, a crew might be going over the other side. I try to make it a point to at least once, if not twice, cover every inch of that hill from left to right, or right to left. It doesn't matter to me either way. But and just work my way down, covering every inch of it, hoping that I'm going to dig something up.
So are you in essence, are you sweeping? Are you panning? But are you? I'm a left to right, right to left. I'm a horizontal panner and sweep either down or up. Do you start at the top and pan down and then go back up, or are you left, go all the way to the right, and then right, go all the way to the left? How do you do it?
I have to go left to right or right to left. And the reason is because I've found that I like to use the bridge of my nose to push my binoculars, and I can do that left to right. So I set the tension. I changed to the pan head style of whether it's with my Coues and my big head or my smaller head with my 10s. I set that pan, the side-to-side motion, I set it quite loose so I can stick my hands in my pockets and be patient. And then I'm just I get sores on the sides of my nose from pushing my binoculars around, but that allows me to be more patient. I find that if I have my hands anywhere near my face, I get impatient and I move too fast. So I do this side to side, and then when I reach the end of as far as I can look left or right, then I use my hand to move down to the next frame and then go left or right again.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly the way I do it. Whether I tend to start at the top, I tend to start on the skyline. I personally tend to, when I first sit down, I'm going to quick pan and quick scan places that, saddles, open areas, just places that are obvious. And then once I've cleared the obvious, and sometimes that takes, 5 minutes, sometimes that takes 20 minutes, then I'm going to go, okay, let's start over here. And then I pan and I basically am sweeping or covering the country, trying to eliminate until I find something. One thing that I find, Gino, is that if I'm sitting there glassing and you know how you're always talking to yourself, at least I am, and you're not seeing Coues deer, I always have to tell myself, start over and slow down. And it seems like I always laugh at myself because I'm all frenzied up to see, spot what I can, and I'm not seeing anything. And I start over and I slow down, and it almost seems within minutes of slowing down, I spotted, an ear flick or something that because I was going too fast, those Coues deer, they can be standing in the wide open and standing still, with their head down, say feeding, and you know right where they're at, but you pan back over to try and find them and you can't see them, and then all of a sudden they move their front leg and they were standing in your field of view the whole time.
Oh, absolutely. I think that, that first scanning of the hillside is generally quick. You're looking for the obvious, the deer that are up moving, the deer that are chasing, something that's going to catch your eye. But each time you go over that hillside, I think you get a little slower and a little slower. you go from looking for the obvious to looking for the completely inconspicuous detail, something that sticks out to you, whether it be a twitch. I know I always hate it when I come across a Tweety bird or a bunch of Tweety birds on a hillside. All it takes is one little flutter of a wing to make your heart stop because you think you just pierced your ear nerve. So I think that's critical. We actually, as you were talking, it reminded me of a deer we saw yesterday. She was laying, out of the wind, and I'd seen her a bunch of times. Every time I'd look there, she was there. And then all of a sudden I looked back and I'm like, where'd she go? And she laid her head flat down on the ground and she looked like a rock laying there. If I hadn't have seen her when her head was up, I would have scanned right over her, simply because she changed her head position.
Yeah, they're amazing animals for sure. Gino, it's been awesome having you on here on this episode. I wanted to ask you in conclusion here, I know you're in the construction business, and I see you do all sorts of jobs. Tell me about, other than guiding, tell me about what you do for work.
Here in Central Arizona, based out of Strawberry, we started a residential home building and remodeling company in '97. I've been in construction my whole life. Followed in my dad's footsteps, been dragging a hammer around, following him since I was like 5. So I've been blessed to be in the field and build a lot of really neat custom homes up here in the Rim Country. Did a lot of this old house projects, turned something that was run down into something just amazing. So that's been most of my career. I've had the opportunity to also branch out. We started a little asphalt maintenance company and also a civil construction company. We've been doing some infrastructure type work all over the state. That's been kind of fun as well. But my roots are definitely in the residential world here in Central Arizona. And that's what we've done all these years.
Awesome. Yeah, I follow you on Facebook, and I see you post pictures and such of different projects. And I mean, it seems like from doing stuff, you're doing something with some dams, and you were doing something at some marinas, and remodeling and home construction. It seems like you do all sorts of work, so I'm sure that keeps your mind occupied, and that's cool. How can listeners, if they want to get a hold of you, either for a guided Coues hunt or elk hunt or what have you, and or if they have any remodeling or construction needs, what is the best way for people to find you?
Well, you can always find my construction company on the web, and Sun Construction at www.andsunconstruction.
And that's A-N-D, and
yeah,
Sun?
Yeah,
okay.
A-N-D-S-O-N.
Okay.
That's our residential company, and for any other construction type stuff, I can be found that way. As far as my hunting goes, I work with A3 Trophy Hunts. They're super easy to get a hold of, Matt or Chad or Jay, and we hunt all over the state. So it really becomes a matter of whether someone is hunting in my particular part of the state or one of our other guys that are more qualified in that region of the state.
Awesome. Well, buddy, I wish you the best of success on your upcoming hunt after Christmas here, and hope to see pictures of a big giant Coues buck. And just thank you for being on and spending time with us. And do you have any closing thoughts or any questions of me?
No, just want to wish you a Merry Christmas, and thanks for having me on.
All right, buddy. Sounds good. Thanks, and have a Merry Christmas yourself, okay?
All right. Thanks, Jay.
Thanks for listening to the J. Scott Outdoors Western Big Game Hunting and Fishing Podcast, brought to you by GoHunt.com Insider. Use the promo code JScott and receive a $50 Coues gift card when signing up for the GoHunt.com Insider. Research faster, hunt more. Go to GoHunt.com/insider and join today.